Hello and welcome to a special edition episode of the New Human Project podcast. I'm your host, Michael Swigert, and today I have with me a good friend and returning guest, Jade Cessna. For those of you who are just joining me, Jade is the author of her first publication, Dreamer to Doer, which is available for purchase on Amazon and also now available as an audiobook. Log on to Audible to listen to Jade narrate her very own nonfiction self-help book. If you'd like to learn more about Jade's book, please check out TNHP Episode 2, which is available on Spotify, Amazon, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. And without further ado, this is Jade Cessna. Welcome back to the show.
Hello.
It's great to have you.
Hi.
So, tell me a little bit about your new audiobook and how you did that.
Yeah. So I just released my new audiobook for my very first book, Dreamer to Doer. And I self-recorded the audio tape and then hired someone to edit the audio for me. And so with this very mic that I'm recording this podcast episode on is what I actually used to record my audiobook on. And it just so happened that the week that I needed to record my audiobook, my grandparents were going on vacation. So I overtook their house because then I could have a nice quiet house, and I took a random closet and I put foam everywhere, pillows. I was like destroying all of their couches, collecting all of the pillows and the cushions that I could. And I was stuffing every corner of the closet so then I could kind of create the sound barrier. So then I could have good and as quality audio as I could have doing this myself. So it was definitely a very homemade project, but it was exciting to do something like that to learn how to record an audiobook and then to apply it myself. And it's kind of fun when you have like a little janky setup and it's not like a professional audio booth or anything like that. Like it just makes the experience feel more alive and you're like, yes, I'm doing this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. I love a good home studio. I've had many different versions of that over the past 5 to 10 years, recording in high school with friends. I mean, we were one time I made this big giant cardboard, basically like recording booth,
Okay.
and I put a bunch of foam on it to block
Hmm.
the sound from getting out. Blankets as well. I've done
Yes.
that. So I totally understand locking yourself in a closet with a bunch of blankets and pillows and making yourself feel really wonderfully claustrophobic just to
Oh,
get a good sound.
seriously. And
Yeah.
hot too. It gets hot in
Yeah.
spaces.
Yeah, and then you get a little nervous and you're like, "Oh, I don't want to mess up. Now I'm sweating. Now
Right.
so especially reading an entire book, recording music is one thing where you're kind of speaking or singing or whatever for like 2 or 3 minutes, but reading an entire audiobook and trying not to mess up, that's quite a difficult thing.
I know because there's some things that you need to switch or change up from the book to the audiobook. So when I would write things like, I hope you're reading this and getting a lot out of it, I would say, I hope you're listening to this and getting a lot out of it. But I had to make that change in the moment as I was reading the PDF of my book on my laptop. And I also had to like, anticipate when a sneeze was coming and be able to tell my audio person like, oh my gosh, I need a sneeze, achoo, and then take a break, reorient myself, and then try to make sure that my tone and my speaking levels was the same as before when before I sneezed. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
a lot of navigating weird things like that. And I took it slow and I read like I did it over the course of 5 days, I think, and I have 14 chapters. So I was doing about 3 chapters a day just to try to preserve my voice and make sure that I was still reading with the enthusiasm and just the tone that I wanted to come across. So I spread it out over 5 days, and I think it came together pretty successfully.
So I know that you kind of had a rough go with recording your audiobook because you had an experience that kind of shook you to your core and made it a little difficult, but you still kind of pushed through and were able to get that audiobook done. If you don't mind, I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for asking. I think that the story of recording my audiobook and what was happening in my personal life is a testament to just the things that life can throw your way and how unexpected and unanticipatory it is, and how important it is to continue to push in the ways that you can to accomplish what you want to accomplish. And so, like I said, I recorded the audiobook over the course of a week, and the first day recording was great. I was at my grandparents' house, everything was smooth, and I was recording away. And then the second day of recording at about 11 o'clock in the morning, I got a call from my dad. And he started it off the same way he always starts off bad news calls. And he said, "Hey, are you alone?" And I was like, "Yes." And he said, "Are you sitting down?" And I was like, "Oh no, this is about to be some bad news, right?" And so he called me and he told me that my uncle had unexpectedly passed away. And to most people, this might not be a big deal, but my uncle and I were pretty close, and it was an unexpected death, and those hit pretty hard and can knock you out sometimes, right? And even just last night, I found myself grieving his death and crying. You know what I mean? Like it's still something. This happened back in March. It's currently November, so it's still been many months removed, and it hit me. And so, that day, I we ended up driving down to Nashville to get my mom from a work conference because it was her little brother who passed away, and she just so happened to be out of state. And I just couldn't even bear the thought of continuing to record the audiobook because of the personal emotions that I was feeling and the grief that I was holding in my soul. It felt so weird to then have to plug in my mic and kind of be joyous and upbeat and reading my audiobook and things like that. And there were many times where I had to take a break and just be like, I can't do this. I cannot even act or pretend to be joyous and upbeat and happy when my personal life has just crumbled and I found out that my uncle passed away, right? And it was so hard to hold those two dichotomies within my individual being and my individual soul at that time, right? Like the great sadness that I was feeling and the sadness that I was absorbing from my family members and my mother. But then the reality of I have a deadline that I need to get this audiobook done by, and I need to be working towards that. And so, through a lot of patience and grace with myself, I was able to continue to record my audiobook. And I think in a way it was a type of distraction from what was happening in my real life, right? Like working on something was a way to get my mind off of it. Um, but I just like, even with the writing my first book, I wrote it after having broken up with my boyfriend of like 3 years. That same week that I had to start writing my book, I
I
was
do
going through
remember
a
that. Yeah.
breakup. Yeah, so
Uh,
it's like these very pivotal moments of this whole process. Like there have been things that have happened in my personal life, and I think it's super easy to get knocked down by those things that happen in your life and stall the progress of your dreams and where you want to be taking your life. But just offering yourself some grace and some understanding and patience and acknowledging that this is a normal part of the process, that as you're trying to make your dreams a reality and as you're pushing to um, really as you're pushing to make your passions a reality for your life and fulfilling your purpose, that horrible things are going to come your way in life, and that's just how life is, right? So
yeah.
kind of learning to balance those things and acknowledge those things but still move forward, I think is an important lesson that we all have to learn.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. Again, I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
That's quite unfortunate. I know you've had a lot of, I remember we were talking about that as well. And, was, I believe we talked about that on the previous podcast as
Hmm.
well. Um, and again, I'm sorry. And I know that he was personal to you because I know, that it's still fresh in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, but I also uh, it's it's inspiring to know that you kept going and that you're still going to meet these deadlines and things like that. As long as your mental health is still stable and
Mm-hmm.
stuff,
For
of
sure.
course. But I'm glad you shared that, and uh, I agree with you. There's there's a lot of things that life throws at you, especially when you're trying to move forward, and it's very easy to kind of remain stagnant and just
Mm-hmm.
stop where you are, especially when something like that happens.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so I'm curious how many times did you have to go back and redo some
Mm-hmm.
chapters or parts and things like that? Because I know alone sometimes when I'm recording music, it can be a lot. It can be a few hours of just, doing things over and over. So I'm curious how you
Mm-hmm.
did that.
Yeah, so there were definitely a few times where I would mess up the order of the words or I would pronounce a word really weird. I'm like, wait, I don't like how I said that. Let me try it again. And then when I went and had my editor do the first round of editing, there were some mistakes that they found. And so that was well after I had created this janky studio in my grandparents' house. So then I had to create a janky studio in my parents' house just to re-record a few sentences and try to splice them back into the original audio of what I had recorded, which was difficult too, because I had to try to recreate the same soundproof room, but I was in a completely different house. I was in a cabin that was made out of wood versus like a regular construction house that's made out of like plywood and not maybe not plaster, but when you have the insulation in the walls and things like that. So even just being in a room that was made out of wood, I noticed the audio difference and I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So trying to recreate it as I was re-recording the places where I messed up or things didn't come out right, that was a bit stressful.
Yeah, of course. You're slowly becoming a digital or a sound artist as well, not just an author
Yes,
now.
I
It
know.
does, yeah, it does have a huge effect, the environment that you're in. So this is kind of a new endeavor for you going on this journey of making your own audiobook. Obviously, you have a really good editor, which is always nice to have on your side. I was curious, have you received any feedback since the release of your hard copy book, or has there been any reviews or anything that have kind of changed your thoughts on the next steps or given you some ideas on what you want to do next?
Yeah, I would say the biggest piece of feedback that I received from my first book is folks really wish that I included more research in my first book. And I definitely wanted to do that, but to be quite honest, I was scared and didn't know copyright policies. So I was really hesitant in including other people's work in my book, especially because it's a for-profit product, right? Like I make money off of my book.
Yeah.
And so, because I really just wanted to write and publish my first book as quickly as I could, I decided not to include any research in it. But with the second book that I'm writing, I learned all the copyright laws that I needed to. I have read a lot of examples of nonfiction books that include research in their books to see how they do it. And I feel a lot more comfortable with including research in my second book. So, I mean, I have documents upon documents in my Google Drive of all the research that I'm hoping to include in my second book. So I would say that's the biggest piece of feedback that I've gotten and that I am actually working towards like working on in my second book.
Yeah, of course. So not only are you a sound artist and author, but now you also need a lawyer. So you
I
have an editor and a
exactly.
lawyer now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I'm curious with that new upcoming book. I know we're kind of focusing on dreamer to doer. This kind of brings me to the next question. What's next for you? Are you looking to stay in the realm of self-help? Because I know you mentioned you're doing research. Is that kind of the route that you're thinking of going?
Yes, exactly. So my second book will be a self-help book, and it will be about the transition after graduating school. So whether that's high school or college and moving into the real world, there is some research done on this season of our lives, and a lot of people refer to it as emerging adulthood because it's not quite adulthood yet. You don't have as many maybe responsibilities as a full-on adult would, like children and marriage and things like that, which of course, there are people our age who definitely do.
Yeah.
But this whole emerging adulthood time period has been really hard for me and has been hard for a lot of people who I talk to who are also going through this. So I figured I would write a book about it as I'm going through it, getting other people's insight into what they're struggling with and what they're going through. And then, of course, including the research on this period of our lives.
Yeah, of course. I completely agree with you. Something that I've struggled with as well. A lot of people I know who, frankly, are still struggling. Uh, so it seems like this is kind of your focus is this sort of young adulthood. I know that
Hmm.
you are also doing some other work in this areas currently as well. So do you have any major life updates? How are things going?
Oh man, I mean, every day I feel like I fight the battle of questioning if I'm making the right decisions that are going to lead to the life that I envision for myself. And I think that that is the hardest part of wondering if all of the puzzle pieces are eventually going to come together in the way that I want and envision them to. And so I am currently working at a university, which has been a great opportunity for me. And I'm leveraging all the resources that I have being back on a university campus, which is something that I completely forgot about, having left a university campus, just how many resources there are available to people, and just working with my target audience every single day and really hearing from the mouth of the horse, what they're struggling with and what they're going through has been very beneficial insight into even writing my second book of what they're afraid of when they're going to be graduating college and what fears and worries they have as they kind of take this next step of their life. So other than that, I'm just chugging along. It's hard to be making such small progress every single day and not really reaping any of the rewards of the progress that you're making, right? I think a lot of us out here, we have these side hustles, we have these passion projects that we're working on. And when I am writing my second book and I'm writing 600 words per day and I'm editing a little bit every day, and it's like, oh my gosh, is this book ever going to come together? Like, and even further than
Yeah.
that, it's like, oh my gosh, is anybody even going to find value out of this book, right? Like, am I wasting my time right now sitting here and writing this book? Or like, is it even going to be valuable to other people? So there's just a lot of questioning in this phase of my life because there are a lot of unknowns in my life. And I think that a lot of people around our age kind of struggle with that. And I mean, I just want everyone to know that it is a common struggle and it's a normal struggle, but to not let that struggle get you down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. I I appreciate your honesty there. I've experienced some of these feelings and sentiments as well myself. And to your point about whether or not you feel like all the pieces are going to come together to finally put you in the life and position that you want to be in. I think that personally, I think you're doing a good job. I think you're right where you need to
Thanks.
be. Um, I agree with you. These projects. I mean, you're sitting on it right now with me.
Hmm.
The New Human Project podcast is my one of my passion projects. So I totally get it. You got your job to do. You got to make
Hmm.
that money that way. But it does take it takes some courage to, not come home from work and sit on the couch and fall asleep.
Mm,
And
yeah.
because that's a common thing is that you waste a lot of your time because no one gets extra time. We were all given the same amount of time
Hmm.
essentially until we die, obviously. But it's how you use it. And I think that, you being at the university and you writing these books for the kind of the psychology of a young adult is perfect because you're getting a lot of that hands-on experience and
Mm-hmm.
it's helping you with your personal projects as well. So I think that's a great thing. So I know that since the release of your book, you've been kind of going on some book tours, talking to people, talking to classes and groups. I was curious if you kind of gained any insight from that or have some experiences you'd like to share on that.
Yeah, I think one of the most fulfilling things that I do as part of being an author is traveling around and doing speaking events. That's really what fills my cup up, is being able to speak words over people and their life. And I think it really resonates with them. And so I had an opportunity to do a speaking event at KIPP Columbus, which is a high school in Columbus. And I spent about 2 hours with these juniors and seniors in high school and was able to kind of speak some words into their lives, such as you're not too young to be pursuing what you really want to be pursuing with your life, and that I believed in them and the vision that they had for their future. And after my speaking event, I had several of the kids come up to me and just tell me that they had never had someone express to them that they believed in them. And it just really sat with me that a lot of people who we interact with on a daily basis have never been told, I believe in you. And you just looking at someone in their eyes and telling them those three words can stick with them for a lifetime and can empower them to do so many things with their lives that they might have never believed they could do before. Just one person believing in them. And that has been one thing that has really stuck with me. And I've tried to incorporate more into my daily life with the folks that I supervise and with my coworkers and things like that. Just genuinely saying and meaning with my heart that I believe in them, and then seeing how that propels them in their life. I mean, that is just one of the greatest lessons that I've learned so far in doing all this stuff.
Yeah, of course, the power of your words. It has an effect on people.
Hmm.
There's been things that people have said to me, very similar things, if not the same, that has positively impacted my life and, made me want to pursue these things and
Yeah.
do the things that I'm doing here. So that's great. I'm really glad you get that experience and the ability to do that because
Hmm.
I feel like sometimes there's a very straight path for people to
Hmm.
go down that we're kind of given or that we're kind of pushed towards, depending on whether that's social pressures or family or friend pressures.
Hmm.
And I think it's good to just kind of, especially for young adults, when you're still kind of, I'm still very impressionable myself as well,
Hmm.
to really let them know, hey, it's okay. You can do what you want to do. There's
Yeah.
not. There's not a guidebook on a way to live. My
Hmm.
parents always said when they were raising us, they're like, we did the best we can because there's no guidebook on parenting, and I think it's the same thing with life. There's no guidebook on a way to live,
Yeah.
even though you are kind of writing one.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Well, it was great getting to talk to you again. I'm so glad to see you. Always a good time to talk with you. We always have great conversations here. Uh, And I look to hear from you soon and also maybe do another review of your upcoming book. Do you have
Mhm.
a timeline or an estimation? No pressure, of course.
Well, that it's good to kind of publicly announce these kind of things because then you're held
Yeah.
accountable to getting it done. I did tell my editor that they should expect the full manuscript by January to edit, and it
Oh,
usually
wow.
takes about 2 months or so to fully edit and things like that. So I'm hoping to publish my second book by the summer of 2025.
Oh, wow. That's actually right. That's kind of what in line with what you said. You said you wanted to
Mhm.
do a book like every year, right? So
Yes,
you'd have like
exactly.
10 books almost by the time you're in your 30s.
Yep.
And looks like you're on track for that. That's great. I know in April we met for your first book, Dreamer to Doer. So I'm
Yes.
expecting to hear from you around then.
Woohoo! It's gonna be
Yeah,
great.
I can't wait. I can't wait. It's going to be a good time. So thanks for coming on the podcast. This is
Of
a
course.
special episode. I just was really excited for the release of your audiobook, which is available now as of today when we're recording, correct?
Yeah. Yes, it is. Grab your copy on Audible, people.
Well, thank you. Thanks for coming on.
Yes, thank you, Michael.